Hello and welcome back to the College Football Fanatics podcast. I'm your host Daniel, and we are here to talk about more college football and news around the league. Today we're going to be talking about some players that decided to return for junior senior year after they for another year at least, that could have gone on to play. They could have gone on to play to go on to the draft. And there are a few that were really surprising. There are a few that not 100% surprising, but there are some that the top ones that I'm thinking of were really surprising to see not enter the draft. So one of the ones that isn't as surprising, but I was pretty surprised by. But there were people who I had talked to who didn't think this guy was going to go, given the quarterbacks currently in the draft. Was Michael Penix Jr. Now, Michael Penix Jr. is the quarterback for Washington. The Huskies. They had a 11-2 record. And he had well over 4,000 passing yards in the season. He had like 4,600 yards, something like that. It was like it was right around there. But he's a lefty. He had 31 touchdowns. And he was even seen as a player who was in the running for a Heisman. Which sort of gives you a look at what type of player he is, that type of thing. Now, the one negative that I have about Michael Penix Jr. and I really like him as a quarterback. I think he's very skilled. I think he's incredibly accurate. I think he's very accurate when he's given time. I think he's very skilled. He's somewhat mobile, actually, for considering how many passing yards he has. He's not going to be like a Lamar Jackson type or a Justin Fields type where he's running the ball every other down. But if he's under pressure, he can get away from that pressure from like a defensive end or something like that. But the thing that I was surprised with was he just decided not to go to the draft, and now he is well in his right to do so, and I think he is set up to have a better year next year than he did. And if he can even get remotely close to his 4,600 yards, then he's probably going to be a lock for a top 10 pick next year. Maybe even top 5. I really like him as a quarterback. The one thing I do have to say is this is completely aesthetic in his throwing mechanic. He is a lefty, and I am not the biggest fan of left-handed quarterbacks. I just think that their throwing aesthetic it looks weird, and I think that sometimes that can actually sometimes mess with the quarterback a little bit. That can even mess with receivers and stuff like that. And it actually also creates his blind side is actually not the left side of the offensive line. It's actually the right side. So you have to really be aware that is his blind side, not the left side, like most quarterbacks, because most quarterbacks, of course, are lefty. Given that most people in this world are lefty, most quarterbacks are righty, given that most people are right-handed. So he was the one that I was the most surprised, that I was like pretty much the most surprised about. And another player that I was really surprised decided to come back, but I really wanted to come back due to my fandom, due to my, he is a key part of the University of Michigan offense, and that was Blake Corum. Blake Corum had one of the best years that a running back can have. And you know, if he has another year like he did this year, and maybe if he gets 2,000 yards next year, he could be, you know, up there for talks like with guys like Reggie Bush. Now, I still think Reggie Bush is, you know, a talent in and of his own, but he's at least up there, and you can't immediately discount him. But Blake Corum had 1,400 yards, and he had 18 touchdowns while missing 2 games. So it's not like he had all of those in all 13 or in all 12 regular season games. No, he missed 2 games, and he still had 14 yards and 18 touchdowns. And I honestly believe that if he had not gotten injured in the Illinois game, he would have been a Heisman winner. I don't think Caleb Williams would have won the Heisman if Blake Corum, if Blake Corum doesn't get injured. I think that there's a true argument to be made that Blake Corum would get the Heisman over Caleb Williams. Now, the Heisman has become a primarily offensive or a primarily quarterback award with wide receivers and running backs and defensive players so often getting kicked to the curb for, you know, a decent quarterback. And not to say that Caleb Williams isn't a very good quarterback. He is, but I just think that there were a couple of better players than him. Especially when you're talking about the running back position. But even then, there's wide receivers who I think overall made a huge difference to their team. You know, Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of those wide receivers. Blake Corum is one of those players who I think made a huge difference to Michigan. He carried them on his back for most of the season. So it's just, you know, I think that it's important to recognize that quarterback position is not always the only position that makes a difference. And I think a lot of people sometimes forget that. All right. Next up is Bo Nix. Bo Nix plays, of course, for Oregon. He got injured. I can't remember when he got injured. But he had, I think, an issue with one of his ankles. And that kind of reduced his production somewhat, not entirely though. He still had 3,500 or almost 3,600 yards. I'm reading it now. It's 3,593, 3,593 yards. So I count that as basically 3,600 yards. And he had like 500. He had 500 rush yards and 44 touchdowns. So it's not like, you know, that it's not like he was, you know, averaging 300 yards a game and then went down to, you know, 120 yards passing a game. Like that's not what happened. It was just it just hampered him a little bit. It brought down his production slightly. But I am very much expecting that Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. will both prove to be valuable assets for their teams next year in a very quarterback loaded Pac-12. And I'm really expecting that they're going to both pop off and make a run for their conference championship. You know, I think Oregon, you know, has a lot of really good players. They're bringing in, you know, more good players, and I'll talk about recruiting soon. But, you know, like I said, I think that they're both great players. Jordan Travis is a quarterback for Florida State. I think he was right to come back, because I don't think that Florida State earlier in the year had enough public recognition, national recognition, to really put Jordan Travis's name high up on, an NFL team's draft board. But with the recruits that they're getting in this upcoming year, and the recruits that they have been getting and transfers and things like that, I expect that Florida State is going to be as good as a large majority of teams. I don't think that 10 wins is an unrealistic number for them. And they could be getting even more. And Jordan Travis, 3,200 yards, 32 touchdowns. Again, very good quarterback. If you if you have anything above like 3,000 yards and 25 touchdowns, I'm like, that's a very respectable number for a college football quarterback. Especially if it's like a quarterback at Michigan who they focus their game on the ground before they ever think about the air. I mean, look how long it took them to have a huge passing game. It took them until basically Ohio State to have a game where, they relied on their passing talent and their wide receivers. Now, I think next year they're going to be relying on that a little bit more, but at a school where, running backs are large pieces, having anybody over, like 3,000, 25 to 3,000, 2,500 to 3,000 yards is a respectable number. And Jordan Travis is well above that at 3,200 yards and 400-ish rushing yards. So, those 32 touchdowns definitely don't hurt. So I think that, the Seminoles will pretty much will have a good amount of their roster coming back, a good amount of their production, and they'll make a run for their conference championship, and they'll really push things to the limit of what they're going to be able to get. So next up, Tommy Eichenberg. He is a Ohio State linebacker, and had 120 tackles this season, which is a good number for a linebacker. He was probably the best linebacker in the Big Ten this year. I at least I would make that argument. He helped Ohio State's defense turn around. Him and I'm blanking on the name, and it's really embarrassing. But I can't remember the defensive lineman that played so well against Penn State. He's a freshman. So I'll have to go look at his name and come back another time and tell you guys. But those two guys really turned around Ohio State's defense, and this was a defense that I think was weaker than most defenses Ohio State has had before. So it was really interesting to see how these two guys really stepped up and became leaders on this defense. So another Florida State player who is also coming back is Jared Verse. Jared Verse is a defensive lineman. He had 16.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks in 12 games, which puts him as one of the top defensive players in the draft. He would be one of the top defensive players in the draft. I mean, would he be at the same level of Will Anderson and Jalen Carter? No, but is he could he go anywhere from what my prediction for him, just having seen him play a few games, would have been something like 10 to 15 because he's just that good, and there's enough teams with a need on defense that they would take him, and I think that he could be a near instant starter on most NFL rosters. But I wasn't entirely surprised. I think he still wanted to. I think he still wanted to see if he could increase his production. Increase that sack total. But it's still, I think CBS had him in the top 10 or near the top 10 in draft rankings. So, let's see. Sam Hartman is the quarterback at Notre Dame, and I think he's transferring somewhere, or he might try and play it out at Notre Dame. I'm not entirely sure. But he was the center. He was the centerpiece for a lot of He was the centerpiece for Notre Dame's offense, basically. And for a long time, he was considered a Heisman contender, and he has decided to stay back. So all the luck to him, and hopefully he does really well. Jer'Jon Newton, who is a defensive lineman for Illinois, and he made, I will say this, he made problems for Michigan. He created issues for Michigan, and it was, as a Michigan fan trying to get past him, it was somewhat annoying to hear his name called. And so he is being talked about as a guy who could have been a first round pick, although sometimes that could be a little he only had like 5.5 sacks, but he pressured the quarterback quite a bit. But he still has a lot of promise, and I think he'll go to the NFL if he has. I don't know how many years of eligibility he has left, but I think he'll go to the NFL after next season if he performs the same, if not better. Cameron Rising. I was surprised when he decided to stay at Utah, because I know he got injured in the Rose Bowl, but he looked really good, and I think this year's quarterback draft class I think is not as strong as previous years, or as strong as what I think the future years will be. I think next year's draft class for the quarterback position is going to be very strong. I think I think Caleb Williams has the eligibility to go to the NFL. Cameron Rising, I think, is going to go. Jordan Travis is probably going to go. JJ McCarthy might go, depending on the type of season he has. So you're going to get a lot of quarterbacks who are very good going to the draft. And Cameron Rising, his stats aren't as as flashy as some of the previous quarterbacks we've mentioned, which is why he's several spots down lower on this list. He had 3,000 yards and 460 rushing yards, 3,000 passing yards, and 460 rushing yards and 32 touchdowns. Which that touchdown number is high. It's not as high as it's not as high as Penix. It's not as high as Bo Nix, not Penix, Bo Nix. But it is very, very high. So who else did I have? Johnny Wilson had a pretty great season, and had a phenomenal season in Florida State's bowl game with over 200 yards. So this will be again a star for next year to look out for on Florida State. He had almost 900 yards this season. He had 5 touchdowns, and he's a giant of a man. He is 6'7". And when somebody is that large, it is really, really freaking hard to cover them, because they have that height advantage that most DN or DBs do not have. Most DBs are around 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", maybe. A lot of them are even shorter than that. Around 5'10". Because 5'11" doesn't exist. It's only 5'10" and then 6 foot. 5'11" does not exist as a height in our world. Nobody in the world is 5'11". I just want to make sure everybody knows that nobody in the world is 5'11". But he is 6'7". He's going to tower over most cornerbacks and safeties in both the NFL and the NCAA. So he is a guy who is just a freak of an athlete. And I would expect next year he's going to do, the same that he did this year, if not better, which is, why I say look out for Florida State being a great team next year. So that's all the players that I want to talk to. I want to talk a little bit about Wisconsin and Luke Fickell. So Luke Fickell obviously had a very successful career at Cincinnati, and when news came over the air that he was moving to Wisconsin, I was both excited and terrified. I was excited because he is now at a school that boosts a proud football tradition, that has national name recognition, and is not part of a conference that I would argue is almost insignificant. And I would say that they're almost insignificant because Cincinnati, because the conference that Cincinnati is in. I'm blanking on the name. The American Athletic Conference. That's it. Let's just run through the names of the teams. So Tulane, UCF, Cincinnati, SMU, Houston, Navy, East Carolina, Memphis, Tulsa, Temple, and South Florida. Now South Florida, I think only won one game last year. Tulane had a great record at 12-2, but making a bowl game is one of those things where, or sorry, not making a bowl game. Making the college football playoffs doesn't happen with the American Athletic Conference. Now, Cincinnati was the first G5 team, group of 5 team to make the college football playoffs, and then they were followed by TCU. But Cincinnati, under Luke Fickell, made it because Luke Fickell himself is a great coach. I am very excited for the future of Wisconsin football with Luke Fickell at the helm of the ship, because when Wisconsin initially said that they were going to fire Paul Chryst, I was a little upset because I'm like, he has been a successful coach for you for a long time, for several years. So you're just going to toss out everything he's done? But then I heard that they were hiring Luke Fickell, and now I'm actually somewhat okay with them firing Paul Chryst. Because I got over that initial gut reaction, and I actually thought it through, and I was like, okay. I always go through, when people say, fire this coach or fire that coach, and usually I'm hearing it about, Jim Harbaugh, until about, last year. But usually when I'm hearing, fire this coach, fire that coach, I always say, okay, if you fire your coach, who are you going to get that's better? Now, some teams, they fire their coach and literally anybody would do better. Just anybody. Just give the job to the janitor, and he'll do a better job of running that football team. But when you're out of school like Wisconsin, and your coach has been relatively successful for the past, 6 years. I believe Paul Chryst was at Wisconsin for about 6 years, and he had, I'm pretty sure, a winning season every year. I go, who are you going to get that's better? Just, who are you going to get that's better? And I'm excited to say that I believe that they got a coach that is better than Paul Chryst. And I am really excited for the future of Wisconsin football. I also said that I was terrified for the future of Wisconsin football because, again, this could also destroy them. If Luke Fickell is not able to recreate what he had at Cincinnati, well then, you've now fired a coach that has had a winning record, who has recruited relatively well, for the past 5-6 years, for a coach that, you're taking a little bit of a gamble on. Now, I think this is a worthy gamble, and the other reason that I'm a little worried is because I don't want my Michigan Wolverines to lose to Wisconsin. That is the other reason that I am worried, and they play them every other year, I believe. Because I don't want my Michigan football team to lose to Wisconsin, and have that loss on their record. And I believe, and I have wholeheartedly believe that with Luke Fickell, with Fickell at the helm, Luke Fickell at the helm, that could truly happen. So that is just that is what I am a little worried about. So, talking about the Big Ten, with that, I think Wisconsin or Iowa are really, or Illinois are really set to take over the Big Ten West. Now, the real battles is in the East with Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. Now, Michigan is the bullies on the block. They're the guys that are going to be like, we're running through you, and we're going to, our big guys are bigger than your big guys, and we are going to move you against your will. And they have been like that for the past 2 years. And if they can be like that again, I have no doubt that Michigan will end up winning. Another Big Ten championship. So I think, my prediction is that Michigan and Ohio State are going to both be going into week 13, 11-0, or week 12, I think, actually. I think they're both going to be going into week 12, 11-0. And it's going to be a big, it's going to be a big game. It's going to be a fun game to watch, like it is. No, it's week 13. I was right. It's week 13. My bad, guys. Sorry. It's going to be a fun game to watch, like it usually is. And I have no doubt that they will both be ranked, in the top 5 again. So I have hope for the future of the Big Ten, and with two Big Ten teams having made the Big Ten or the college football playoffs, does the Big Ten now have a shot at surpassing at the SEC as the biggest conference, or the best football conference? And I say right now they're not. They're still not. They still have things to prove. They still have things that they got to work on. But if they get another 2 teams in next year, and maybe a year after that, the sky is the limit. They already have a $7 billion contract with I think Fox and other media companies. So they have this huge money contract coming in. Their commissioner just left to go be the president at the Bears, or the I think it's the CEO of the Bears. So it'll be pretty interesting to see what goes on in the next couple of years with the Big Ten. So that's going to be it for tonight. This is the episode that I'm releasing this Wednesday. And I will be releasing an episode on Friday. I'll have to pre-record that tomorrow because I'm not going to be in town and on this on Friday. I want you guys to tune in to the WIUR radio show on YouTube, because we are going to be having a special guest. We're going to be talking about the draft, about players that returned this season. We're going to be, like I did today, we're going to be talking about players that returned to college this season, players that are going on, what's going to happen with the number 1 overall pick, everything regarding the draft. And I really want to see you guys there and supporting and showing out the show. So leave a like and a comment below if you can. I really enjoy making these. Tell me what I can do better. Tell me what I can, things like that. So let me know, because I really appreciate the feedback. So I will see you guys next time. I hope you guys have a great night or a great day whenever you guys are watching this. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. See you guys.